And so, welcome everyone to the final session of the summit. For this fireside chat, we invite you behind the scenes of development management and aid funding structures. Against the backdrop of a narrative of global health imperialism, there has been soaring rhetoric about transforming the structure of development aid and funding. The commitment, as espoused in 2016 by the international donor community, was to increase the proportion of local organization direct funding to somewhere around 25%. The reality was, in fact, a decrease from what was then 3.5% in the same year to 2.1% by 2020. As if in a perfect storm with the onset of the COVID global pandemic, additional data requirements surfaced, with organizations expected to find innovative ways of meeting the information demands from their benefactors. This paradox, or rather irony, presents a unique challenge of doing more with less at a time when donor expectations are at an all-time high. So helping us to further unpack and understand the nature of this complex dilemma is a team of development experts and seasoned program implementers. We have Rachel Sibande, who is Senior Director, Country Outreach Portfolio for Digital Impact Alliance, DIAL. Rachel has led major development projects in many countries and is an internationally recognized entrepreneur and wealth creator. We also have on the virtual podium, as it were, Simon Indira, the founding director of Compelling Works, with professional experience that spans the field of health information systems, e-health, m-health, digital solutions, conceptualization and design, information system security, and project management, including team work across all aspects of an organization, from strategic to tactical to operational. Finally, welcome Dr. Richard Gakuba, a senior health informatics consultant at ICAP. Richard led the establishment of a new e-health unit and developed a national e-health strategic plan and policy for Rwanda's Ministry of Health. He was awarded the Holy Lad mHealth Pioneer Award, and Dr. Gakuba is also an Eisenhower Fellow. So before we start, I just want to once again remind you that you can use the Q&A feature to ask your questions as we go along, and I will take these right at the end. So to kick us off, I will start by asking each of our panelists here, or I guess to tell us from their perspective, how have you experienced this paradox playing out in your own work within the last 2 years?
Yes, thank you. Thank you very much, Busoye. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone across the whole world. So I think the COVID pandemic has revealed a lot. I'll talk specifically about Malawi. Before the COVID pandemic, response working on a weekly basis. Yeah, so you send notifiable diseases out on a weekly basis. That means if there was an Ebola outbreak, we would probably get to know a week later. Today, the IDSR system of Malawi releases statistics, maybe not just daily, but actually real time. Now, to realize that, you must invest a lot. And that's where the paradox comes in.
Thank you, Simon. And what about you, Richard? What do you bring to this?
Yeah, thank you so much. Sorry, I was on mute. And thanks to all the viewers and those who are listening to us. This is a very interesting topic that was really very carefully selected, and I'm so glad that we're discussing this. I would like to talk about it in two perspectives. About specifically how the donor funds are affecting or lack of having effect thereof in the countries where they are intended to. And I'm going to talk about this in two ways. One is the private sector, whereby some of the local organizations who are the local implementers don't have opportunities to apply for these big NOFOs, simply because the eligibility criteria are just too much for them, and they have no chance to compete against all the big organizations. So you end up having the big organizations, international ones, taking up all the contracts from the donors. But in effect, what actually happens is that they do subcontract the local organizations to do most of the work. So end of the day, you find that these local organizations are the ones doing the actual work in many ways. So which means they're actually capable of doing the job. But they are on the third, if not fourth tier down the pecking order of the funding. So that's not a very good thing. So obviously, the amount of funding that becomes effectively used by the local organization is very small. The second part of the private sector, local private sector, is the solution developers, the innovators. So you find that most big organizations come with already developed, solutions that are being developed by the Western world, so to say, and they come as solutions. But yet we have local innovators here who actually have really good solutions, but don't have a chance to actually get them put to use. And that all both combined means that we are not even creating jobs for the local market. We're not even building capacity for the local organizations or the local people to build a mass skill of people to implement and develop these systems. So that's one perspective I would look at it. And then the second is on the government side of things. There's always this excuse that governments don't have capacity to implement or to manage these funds and so on and so forth. But let me use just one example. Way back in 2009, in Rwanda, when I was the director of Digital Health, there was funding. We got some funding from the Rockefeller Foundation. It was really small seed funding, but we were given a chance to prioritize what we really wanted at that time. And we said, you know what, we need to get people in the ministry that wake up in the morning every day thinking about digital health, not just be left, digital health be left to just a few people who will take time off to do something. So we hired a few people in the Ministry of Health and started creating a small team which works and breathes digital health, basically. And part of that funding included piloting health information exchange, scaling up. OpenMRS is one of the open source medical record systems. But I would say that the most effective of the funding was that created the leadership in the ministry, because we're able to lead not only those projects that were intended for that funding, but also even all the other projects. We managed to do donor coordination, put some policies and strategies in place. So I think empowering these governments, not just giving an excuse that they can't manage, but rather empower them to give them some startup funding for them to start creating leadership and governance around digital health. Those are the two points I wanted to make right now. Thank you.
Thank you all very much. And I'm hoping that Rachel's audio and connection is back now, because the next question would be for you. So the idea of funding directly more local organizations has been termed sort of the grand bargain, because you get more bang for your buck if you let people who know the context drive the intervention and the implementation. But somehow the funding for these local organizations have decreased. And so, Rachel, my question to you is, how has this kind of overall impacted local organizations' ability to prioritize digital solutions over more foundational intervention needs?
Thank you very much, Busoye. I hope you can hear me well now and that our audience can.
Yes.
Thank you. So, I mean, the shift to digital that has come with the COVID-19 pandemic has almost been mandatory or forced or indeed failed in most cases, just because of the nature of the restrictions that the pandemic has brought. In terms of how the decrease in funding has impacted local organizations, obviously, yes, it's been a huge impact in the sense that instead of interventional needs, they've had to leverage the barrier of access to digital. We do know, for example, the UNCTAD reports in its recent E-Trade for All report that most small and medium enterprises have actually leveraged digital platforms to enhance trade in the era of the pandemic. However, this is very true for most developed countries than it is for developing countries. So the access to digital platforms remains a challenge. When you look at access to education, access to financial services, for example, built on the basis of having to access digital before you can actually access education, having to access digital before one can access financial services because of the pandemic. And so we know that, for example, over 1 billion children have not been able to access education during the pandemic, and majority of Africa's population remain unbanked. The challenges around access to digital platforms have been exacerbated and have exacerbated the access to the social services themselves, which these local organizations should have been focused on in enhancing access to education, access to health, or access to food security dynamics, or access indeed to financial services. Now, all these foundational intervention needs have dwindled because of COVID pandemic, which has brought in the need of accessing digital, and yet digital access is a barrier. But there is hope, because the mobile phone is one ICT tool that I believe offers the promise to enhance access to digital services more than any other tool. And we do know that 50% of the African population have access to the mobile. And so I'm hoping we can get more funding to local organizations to leap this digital barrier, but also to enhance communities' access to digital platforms and digital skills so that they can access all these foundational services around education, health, agriculture, and financial services, just to mention a few.
Thank you very much, Rachel. As we're on the sort of theme of digital solutions, and Simon being the consummate health technologist here, is there a ray of hope anywhere? I mean, are there places where digital development is actually thriving? And if you can maybe identify any of these, what would you say is some of the successes or the innovations that are not just, one corner of a country somewhere in a pilot, but really at scale that you can highlight?
Yes, thank you very much. And maybe to build on what Rachel just explained, the whole leveraging of digital solutions to improve on well-being, let's put it that way, has become very pronounced during this COVID pandemic. People have begun appreciating that we need digital. I talked about the integrated disease surveillance and response, giving us accurate statistics on a daily basis. That gives hope to the health sector. It basically means we have the capacity and potential to innovate and get products out there. If you look at some countries in Africa, tech platforms like, for example, Jumia, that is being used for trade. In Uganda, when the lockdown was declared, Jumia was making losses of 2 billion Uganda shillings per month in sales. So we are talking about $600,000, $700,000 per month in sales. And these are goods that are ordered locally by the locals. If we look at, for example, the revolution around technologies like M-Pesa, that started in Kenya and has kind of become the de facto standard for mobile money. It has made the mobile phone powerful, and it has shown us that with digital solutions we can go much further than that. In Uganda, we have technologies like Uber, safe rides and all that, that makes this mobility possible. Richard comes from Rwanda. In Rwanda, if you want to travel during the COVID era, you apply digitally online, and then it's approved. So, and it's approved on your phone. So if police stop you, you show them the phone and they see the approval and let you go. So all help. The international community, as well as key national actors, we should just be extremely careful not to end up in a situation where this whole momentum that we have developed in order to survive the COVID pandemic does not become another pilotitis, like we call it in the global community, such that at some stage people say, wow, it's over, so let's go back to business as usual. I think this is the chance we have to hold on to this momentum and gear it to the next level. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Simon. And actually, before I go to Richard, I think I want to bounce this back off Rachel again. That while we've seen digital solutions thriving, the converse is also happening, right? So where are we still falling short? And I think this might actually be a really good, perhaps dovetails into the foundational needs that you spoke about before. But where is the digital development struggling at the moment, and what can we do to address these gaps? So that would be for Rachel.
Thank you, Busoy. I think we are falling short in a couple of areas, but I'd like to highlight a few. Number one is the fragmented funding. There's a lot of siloed funding and support of digital development projects. You will find that one institution is being supported to develop a digital health platform, maybe within the HIV space. Another is also getting funding just to develop a digital health platform around TB, and yet maybe another comes through for COVID-19. There's a lot of siloed and fragmented implementation of digital development projects that affects scale, sustainability, replicability, and it distracts the possibility of us getting to a place where digital and data initiatives can be deployed sustainably. What is important is for funders to move towards more pooled and coordinated funding mechanisms. It shouldn't be a competition. If we are really driving towards building sustainable digital development systems, there needs to be more coordination around that space. I think the second aspect is building more open and interoperable systems. It's possible that we might never cater for all the needs of a particular sector. However, it is important that funders and development experts within the digital development space can advocate and work towards building systems that are interoperable. So that if today we build a system that is capturing data or information around one particular disease, let's say malaria, it should be an interoperable system that ultimately, subsequently, it can interoperate with another, let's say, laboratory management system. Or if it's a national ID system or a digital ID system, it is not being built for only one particular sector, but it is being built as a foundational building block that ultimately can scale, replicate, and become interoperable even with other systems outside of the current scope. Let me stop there. Thank you.
No, thank you very much. I think these are points that will resonate with lots of people, and I think they are also been rehashed over the decades. Pooled funding, verticalization of programs. So yeah, thank you, Rachel. And Richard, one question here is, as we're at the cusp of something almost new, because the pandemic has now been quite enduring it's becoming sort of the new normal. When you look over the landscape, sort of development and digitization, what do you see as emerging issues from your perspective?
Well, thanks so much. I mean, there's so many issues have emerged, obviously, from a digital landscape point of view. One amongst those that is very, very key is capacity. The capacity of our own people locally to address some of the challenges. But I would say, allow me to say that these issues are also at the same time opportunities, because once an issue emerges, you really have to find a way of addressing it, because otherwise you won't survive. So we are in survival mode right now. So one of those indeed is capacity. The other is prioritization of resources, which are scarce, of course. Addressing this within the perspective of donor funds. Obviously, the funds are coming to do just some particular things. We are now attending to COVID-19, but there are also other issues that we might, leave behind while we prioritize for COVID-19. But again, I'm also saying that we are learning lessons with COVID-19. Let me just give one example. Before COVID-19, we had the disease surveillance system, and I'm kind of complimenting what Simon said. When COVID hit, everyone went home, but the local staff here built their own system in terms of COVID response, from registering all the cases, to keeping track of where the cases are, case tracking, up to a point where now we are offering certificates, right? Vaccination certificates, which fulfill a lot of criteria, including digital and being printable and so on and so forth. And all that had to be done because we're in survival mode, and it had to be done, right? So it's like we have that issue, but we've sorted it out. Yeah, so I think the key issues here, capacity, resources, but I guess there are solutions that are being found. So I want to still emphasize that they are good problems to have, so that you can find solutions for them.
No, thank you for that response, Richard. And this question is for you, Simon. Given that there is an imperative to focus, and what are the areas and topics that we consistently miss because we have our head down focused on implementation and delivering, often on sort of donor priorities?
Yeah, some of it has already been mentioned. So governance is one. I usually tell people that the digital landscape has advanced and innovated much faster than the organizational structures, in especially ministries of health. So we must strengthen our governance structures. Most countries still manage digital systems under monitoring and evaluation and statistics office. The siloed approach, that's one. Governance needs to be strengthened. Another thing we need to appreciate is the fact that digital health is no longer a sectoral issue. It's multi-sectoral. In fact, the transition from Millennium Development Goals to Sustainable Development Goals is also a testament to this, because you have all these different goals kind of like interlocked. We now have to monitor ports of entry, appreciated that the world is a global village. Yeah, so mobility is very high. The transport industry has to work with the health industry to contain this situation. Weather vagaries and hygiene standards are affecting health because of contagious diseases, and digital health has a critical role to play. And finally, we still don't know where COVID came from, but it has underscored the relevance of One Health. So integrated disease surveillance is going to have to extend beyond human health and bring animal health into context. And the final one, which Rachel mentioned, that we all know, is this whole thing about fragmentation and parallel systems. I would just say the old adage saying that goes that so many rats cannot dig a hole. In so many development partners cannot deploy digital systems unless they work together on one system. Thank you.
So, Simon, I think you've actually given us something to tweet. So many rats cannot dig a hole. I think that's the next slogan for the digital development principles. Thank you for that. And Rachel, I think you might be in a really good position to respond to this question, which is, what do you think donors and funders consistently miss when they are investing in digital solutions and development?
Thanks, Posoi. I think to where Simon ended, so many rats cannot dig a hole. We have so many funders funding very similar things within the same space. That creates a lot of duplication of effort and loses out the opportunity for collaboration within the local partners that they are funding, where they could have achieved more if that collaboration would have been driven at the donor level. So that is number one. I think donors also miss out the opportunity to play a convening role to bring potential implementing partners together to build mutually beneficial relationships and partnerships between local organizations and international organizations to build capacities of both. Donors also miss out because sometimes they come in with a philosophy, a strategy, a hypothesis, from wherever they come from, which is very different to the context on the ground. The dynamics around digital development in a developing country like Malawi, for example, is very different from a developed country. Even within Africa, going to be the same as what would drive mobile penetration in a country like Malawi, for example. And so it is very important often that donors have to engage into the local context, amplify and hear voices of the local organizations that are closer to the work, that understand the problems better than anyone else, as they carve out strategies and funding philosophies in their approaches for programs that they would like to fund. I think lastly is the obvious one, which is, it has to be demand driven. It has to be a bottom-up approach. It cannot always be driven from the donor perspective because we're going to be missing the bull's eye. There has to be a mechanism to also support local organizations to build their own sustainability. Most of the cites that Simon had referred to is there because donors have been funding initiatives only to deploy for 2-3 years and for that initiative to die. So it's pretty much going into a virtuous cycle of failure. But donors need to also and build the sustainability of these so that they can live on even beyond that donor funding. And I'm glad that we've seen organizations that are doing that, like brother funders, like the African Visionary Fund, which is funding local-led African organizations, the Sigo Family Foundation as well. We've seen them integrate unrestricted funding as they fund local led African organizations, all with the purpose of ensuring that the initiatives that are being implemented are not necessarily for a short period, but they are building resilient organizations that can survive, sustain, and continue with the development agenda with or without the donor themselves. Thank you.
Thank you. That's a great response. Thank you, Rachel. And I'm going to give you 30 seconds, perhaps 20 seconds before we take questions to answer this question. What can implementers do better? And I will start with you, Richard. You are on mute. I will start the clock just now.
I'm here. Sorry. I said, sorry, I see we're running out of time. So I'll just summarize what I think implementers can do better very quickly in 3 ways. One is to support leadership. And I think that can't be emphasized enough. Simon has hinted on it as well. Support the leadership of these governments and organizations to do the work themselves. Number 2, engage with the local private sector, because this is the way development is done. You create jobs by doing that. You build capacity at the same time. So I think that's the better way to use development money than bringing experts to do the job and then go back. The third is don't bring solutions. Come with the listening ear and listen to the local people, listen to the leadership and the citizens of that country, wherever you are, and you develop a solution together, but don't bring a ready finished solution to implement in any country. And but let me summarize by mentioning that this whole global goods or public goods that we've been all talking about. If you look closely, you see that most of these global goods are developed from the Western world. And the intention of creating global goods is to attract funding from donors, right? So if that's even emphasizing it more and making it worse, that you're only picking things from the Western world and still diverting funds to those goods. So please pick global goods that are developed locally, that actually address local problems and initiatives. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Richard. And Simon, what about you?
Yeah, what can implementers do? Got
better.
Your question right.
Yes, what can implementers do better?
What can they do better? Yeah, I just have one key point, also given the limited time we have. For me, my mantra is design with the user. Mm-hmm. Design with the user in order to get solutions that work. We are doing it here in Malawi, working with Cooper Smith on a blunt eye prevention strategy project. We've learned a lot that it's, like they say, it's better to give yourself wholly to an individual than to fight diligently for the masses. So in our case, we've worked with only 21 HIV to understand how they want to use information, to design with them user interfaces, version after version of prototypes and wireframes, with the hope that they reach where they tell us, yes, if you can design it this way, we shall use the system. That would be my key message to all implementers. Thank you.
Amazing. Thank you. Thank you, Simon.
Thank you.
Well, to our panelists, I want to say a very big thank you so much for such thought-provoking contribution from you. So I'm going to go straight to the Q&A now. And we have a question from Takondwa, and this has been directed to Rachel. And he says that, it's interesting comment about the silos and fragmentation in regards to the funding and development of digital tools. Do you have any insights in terms of what larger donors and partners are doing to address this silo effect?
Quick one, Busoye, and thanks Takondwa for the message. One quick solution to that is pooled financing. It would help to ensure that donors can pool financing, collaborate around design and investment into digital projects. Recently, we've also seen investment frameworks from the donors. For example, there's the Digital Health Investment Framework, if I'm not mistaken. All these are meant to ensure that there can be mechanisms to ensure that there is no siloed, fragmented, or duplicative efforts from the donor's perspective as they make investments into digital development. Thank you.
No, thank you, Rachel. And actually, to balance the narrative, Linda Muyumbu, she's made a good point here to say USG through PEPFAR are now funding local organizations and not international NGOs. The call for proposals are actually favoring local organizations. They're calling it Journey to Self-Reliance. I think we need to call that out specifically just so that we have a balanced narrative here. So thank you, Linda, for that point. We have a question from Catherine, and the question is directed to Rachel, asking how can implementers help champions engage end users to stay engaged and motivated with the new system in the months after it's been deployed? So how implementers can help champions engage end users to stay engaged and motivated with new systems after it's been deployed?
Right. I would also want to hear Simon's perspective on that.
I was actually going to say that too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because he's at the forefront of. It'd be great to hear how, as an implementer with Cooper Smith and Compelling Works, they do that best. Simon?
Yeah, thank you very much. So, if you look at the traditional digital health landscape, earlier on it was called HMIS, Health Management Information System, and it was one way. You collect at the source and send it up to the central level for statistical and budgeting purposes. Today, that has changed. We had the Health Metrics Network framework of WHO way back 2003. Sometime in 2012 came WHO classification of digital health interventions with different blocks, the health worker, the client, the health managers, and the data managers. And within each of those blocks, you have so many systems. What that simply communicates is that people want to use data. People don't want to collect data and send it somewhere. So the very first thing that we have to do as champions at the front line is to make sure that whatever systems we design is generating data that people will use at the point of care. Then the system will run itself. I usually ask people, I don't know who of you has read a WhatsApp manual. There is no WhatsApp manual, but we all know how it works. Yeah, that's what we should be aspiring to achieve in the digital health landscape, to say we get solutions that people love and cannot do without. Thank you very much.
No, brilliant. And I think it would be useful to have sort of like a strategic policy perspective on that. How do you keep, users engaged after deploying a system? So I feel like, Richard, you may have maybe a slightly different a nuanced perspective to that of Simon, who's come from an implementer perspective.
Yeah, thank you. I think from a policy perspective, for every solution that has been implemented or is yet to be implemented, it should be addressing the people who are in need, addressing the people's needs. I think from a conceptual perspective, as a policy, in fact, for every system to be implemented, they should demonstrate that you are actually addressing the local people's needs. We have such a policy here in Rwanda, whereby for any major government funding to be allocated to a solution, you have to demonstrate that it is touching the population, the masses, not just dwelling on system improvement, because that has been done for many, many years. So that's one policy perspective that I think could be very helpful.
No, this has been great. I think we are running out of time, and what a great way to end the summit. We've had some really beautiful answers. Pool the funds because too many rats are not able to dig a hole. You need to work together. And you need to create systems from a policy perspective that would actually meet a particular need of the population that you are targeting. So I want to use this opportunity to thank all the panelists, individually Dr. Richard Kaguba, Rachel Simbande, and Simon Indira. Thank you so much for your contribution to this fireside chat. It's been absolutely awesome.